Hey, Travis again. I'm an audiobook narrator. I feel like I just did this, and it's because I just did this. Yesterday, I did a read of the first of Brandon Sanderson's secret novels that he wrote during COVID lockdown, and it was a lot of fun. And now I'm going to do some of the second one, and I'm aware that that makes me kind of a tryhard, and I feel a little bad about that. But this book is way closer to the stuff that I'm normally called upon to narrate, so I just felt like I should probably do it. Just because I want to, honestly, is really what it gets down to. Anyway, again, if you don't want any spoilers about these books, you should probably pop right out. But if you want to stick around, great. So, this one is first person, and it's kind of almost isekai. So I do a lot of that, and I do a lot of this kind of quippy first person POV stuff in the kind of audiobooks that I generally get asked to do. And so why the heck not? I'm going to do it. First two chapters. Yeah? All right. Let's get into it. The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. Part 1. Seriously, fish suck. Chapter 1. I hated fish. Standing in the burned-out field, surrounded by charred stalks of grain and smoldering ash, I could safely say this single fact. I hated the taste of fish. The pungent flavor, the texture of the flesh, which shreds like something rotten, the sharp jab of the needle bones, which always seem to be hiding in the meat no matter how hard you search. Yep, fish. Disgusting. That was, at the moment, the sum total of what I could remember about myself. No name, no background, just a latent hatred of fish. Damn, what had driven that point into my brain so forcefully? Had a flounder killed my parents or something? I turned around, hand to my head, trying to make sense of the black void that had consumed my entire self-identity. I was in a field. Stalks of something grew around me, plants a few inches tall. My utter inability to distinguish the variety indicated I probably wasn't a farmer. So why was I in a field? And a partially burned one, at that. The burn marks made a circle, maybe 10 feet in diameter, with me in the center. Only, just nearest me, the plants hadn't been burned. My feet stood on green stalks smashed down into the soil. I glanced behind me and found that the non-burned portion made a distinctive human shape. My shape. A person stencil. So, I was fireproof, maybe. That would be nice. I appeared to be male, of average height and build, maybe a tad muscular, or perhaps I was flattering myself. I wore a pair of sturdy lacing boots that were quite good at stomping down crops. My primary clothing was a long overshirt, a brown tunic on top of that, and a vibrant cloak over that, so I probably wasn't going to get cold anytime soon. Under the tunic, blue jeans? Yeah, blue jeans. With a tunic and a cloak? That was odd. Oh, hell, was I a cosplayer? And why could I remember that word perfectly, but not my own name? Right, so maybe I'd gone out into a field to take pictures for the local Renaissance fair or whatever. I'd brought along pyrotechnics to make a cooler shot of my character, and I'd accidentally blown myself up. That seemed plausible enough. So where was my camera? My phone? My, car keys? My pockets turned out to be empty. I hesitantly stepped away from the me stencil, my feet crunching on crisply charred stalks of once plants. That was an uncomfortably round circle my explosion had created. Like it was perfectly shaped, and some of the stalks were still smoldering. The air smelled of smoke and sulfur. I did a quick search around the burned-out circle, and I didn't find anything of note. Dirt, rocks, plants, no pile of belongings. I was beginning to doubt my photo shoot theory. Maybe I was just a weirdo who liked to dress in old-timey clothing and, go explode in fields. You know, as one does. In the distance, I saw a dirt road leading to a group of old-timey buildings with thatched roofs. They were far enough away that I couldn't tell much else about them. I shook my head and let out a lengthy sigh. I had to— Wait, what was that on the ground? I rushed over and plucked a fluttering piece of paper from between two stones. How had I missed this in my search? The edge was burned, and it only had a few lines of text on it. The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, 4th edition, by Cecil G. Bagsworth III. I read the words over 3 times, then looked into the distance at those old-timey buildings again. The truth began to settle on me. I wasn't a cosplayer. I was visiting some kind of theme park. Was that more or less nerdy? Now that I knew what to look for, I spotted another loose piece of paper fluttering at the edge of the field near some woods. Maybe it would have a map on it telling me how to get out of this place, or at least list where I could find a first aid station. I'd obviously hit my head on something. This page was burned worse than the other one. 2 chunks of the text were legible, one on the front side, one on the back. Can be traumatic, though don't worry. As part of your package purchase, a suitable location will be chosen for you to recuperate upon arrival. In addition, it is suggested that you use the handy notation guide at the back of the book where you can write pertinent information about your life. The transfer process can leave the mind muddied, but often a few facts about one's life can jog loose other details. Don't stress the initial disorientation. It is a common side effect, and all you need to do is— Well, that seemed an awful place to cut off. I flipped the page over. Seemed that the offerings of more expensive packages, sold by so-called premium companies, might be more useful in helping you recuperate. Servants, a luxury manor, and medical staff, but the Frugal Wizard doesn't need to be so extravagant. Indeed, such services might make things too easy. See the study done by Bagsworth et al., page 87. Though we can accommodate such requests as well, don't fear if you can't afford them. The Frugal Wizard is capable and confident on their own and does not need coddling. With this handbook, you can navigate easily. Just read on to learn all the tips and secrets you will need for— All right, so maybe I'd bought some kind of travel package, one that was really hard on the body for some reason. I put a hand to my head, and a thought fluttered at the edge of my consciousness. I'd chosen this, hadn't I? I'd chosen to— do what? For a moment, I seemed so close to answering that. Then it was gone. Regardless, it didn't look like I'd arrived at a suitable location to recuperate. I'd woken up in the middle of a field. A burning field. The review almost wrote itself. An ideal experience if you happen to be a pyromaniac cow. 1 star. Voices in the distance. My body moved before I registered the sounds, and in seconds I'd slipped into the forest and put my back to a tree trunk. I reached to my side by reflex for— Hell, was I reaching for a gun? I was wearing nothing of the sort, but I found myself uncomfortable by how quickly and silently I dodged for cover. It didn't necessarily mean anything nefarious, though. I mean, maybe I was just a champion player of hide-and-seek, or, paintball hide-and-seek. I'd just been thinking about finding help, so I should have been happy to be noticed, but something made me stick there behind that tree, my breathing slow and easy, deliberate. Whoever I was, I had experience at this sort of thing. I was close enough to hear when the people arrived. "What is it, Eelston?" a timid man's voice said, speaking perfect modern English, albeit with an accent I couldn't quite place. It sounded vaguely European. "Lanswhite?" "This was no act of white," a stronger male voice said. "None that I've seen, least."
"Logness flames, maybe," a woman's voice said. "Look at the outline of that figure. And there were those incantations scattered about."
"It looks like someone was burned alive," the first voice said. "Fires from heaven consuming him. That clap of thunder on a sunny bright day?"
The deeper voice grunted. I stayed in place and resisted the urge to peek. Not yet, my instincts whispered. "Call everyone together," the firm voice eventually said. "We'll put out sacrifices tonight as if from a harvest. And Hild, that scop, did she leave yet?"
"Earlier today, I think,"
the woman said.
"Send a boy to chase her down and beg her return. We may need a binding, or worse, a loosening."
"She's going to like that,"
the woman said. Another grunt. Then footsteps on the soil, retreating. I finally peeked around the side of the tree and picked out the 3 people walking back toward the distant buildings. 2 men and a woman in archaic clothing. Tunics and loose, baggy trousers on the men. Weren't they supposed to wear hose under those? I could swear I'd seen that in a museum or something.
Both were dyed in faded earth tones, though the taller of the two men had a yellow-orange cloak of a color so vibrant I had trouble believing it was period authentic. The woman had on a sleeveless white-brown dress over a darker one of a slightly longer fit. Other than the orange cloak, they looked the part of old-school peasants, at least better than I did with my jeans. So, another point in favor of this being a theme park? I mean, they'd been speaking English after all. Yet, wouldn't workers in a theme park speak with some kind of old-timey British affectation? These and thous and milords and the like? Plus, why would they keep up the act when nobody was around? I needed more information, and as I peeked after the retreating figures, I noted some others gathering and sifting through the field, picking up something. Scraps of paper. From the book. It seemed that most of the pages had blown that direction. All right, mission accepted. I needed those pages. Chapter 2. Part of me wanted to stalk out and demand answers, play the role of irate customer, make them break character. Yet, something about all this, it felt like I shouldn't do that. It felt like I should stay hidden. As I considered that, I realized why. A part of me was convinced that somehow they weren't actors, that this was all insanely authentic. At least, whatever was going on here, my gut said those people were unwitting participants. Damn, that sounded ridiculous, didn't it? Nevertheless, I felt like I was a person who trusted his gut, so I stayed put, watching covertly from the shadows as the sunlight waned and the peasants began to gather back in town. Soon after sunset, the place went dark. Like, really dark. Basement from a horror movie dark. Clouds had moved in, obscuring the stars, and there was apparently no moon tonight. Plus, I didn't see a single light in the town. No electric lights, of course. But I'd expected some torches, some bonfires, for the guests. I patted the tree I'd been using for cover. "Thanks for the cover," I whispered. "You're a good tree. Tall, thick, and most importantly, wooden. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Would hide behind you again. Half a point off for lack of refreshments." Then I paused. That had just kind of slipped out. But it was the second time I'd done something of the sort. So, was that a clue to who I was? I was some kind of reviewer who rated, trees? I wouldn't have guessed that was a job, but imitation peasant seemed to be one, so who knew? I slipped out from behind the 4.5 out of 5 tree and found that my skills as a sneak were exceptional. I moved through the rows of partially grown plants, barely making a sound despite the darkness. Awesome. Perhaps I was a ninja. And again, why the hell did I know what a ninja was, but not what I'd done for a living? Beyond the field, I found the road, which was fashioned of packed earth. I crouched there, looking toward the town, glad that the clouds were opening up a little starlight. It turned the village from horror movie basement dark to something more like horror movie in the woods dark, so improvement, maybe? I wasn't used to this kind of primal darkness. The shadows seemed deeper, as if strengthened by the knowledge that I couldn't control them with the flip of the switch. I moved among the silent homes anyway, and found that there couldn't be more than 20 buildings here, all of a triangular shape, wood and thatch. 2 out of 5. Probably has terrible Wi-Fi. I thought I heard a river somewhere in the near distance, and there was a large lump of darkness further on. Maybe a much larger building? I skirted the village, and on the other side found the river. Well, the stream. Here I knelt and scooped up some water to drink. I figured my medical nanites would neutralize any bacteria before it gave me too much trouble. I froze in place, hands halfway to my mouth. Medical nanites? Yes, tiny machines inside my body that performed basic healthcare functions. They weren't cheap, but they would keep me generally healthy. They'd stop toxins, prevent disease, and break down what I ate to provide ideal nutrition and calories. And in a pinch, they could provide emergency wound healing functions. Last time I'd been shot, I'd been back on my feet within the hour, but my nanites had been knocked completely out for a good 2 days. All that came back in a flood. Hot damn, that was a piece of the puzzle. Did I have any other augments? I couldn't remember, but I did know I'd need more food than an average person. In specific, I needed high-calorie food, or Carbon? I mean, technically anything organic would work. It's kind of the meaning of the word, but some sources were better than others. I glanced back at the town. Somewhere, a child had started crying. That should have calmed me, as it indicated something was alive back there. Unfortunately, nobody comforted the child, and the solitary wails creeped me out even further. I controlled my nerves and crept up along the river until I reached a wooden bridge. After crossing this, I was finally close enough to make out more of the large shadow lump. That was a log wall, a fortification. It looked sturdy enough, though I'd have expected something tall and stone, castle-like. To find a wooden one left me a tad disappointed. I withheld my review for now, though. Maybe it was period accurate. This had to be where I'd find the more important people in the town, like perhaps the man with the deep voice who had spoken authoritatively to the others. Indeed, though I couldn't tell for certain, it seemed that light was coming from in there. I scouted around the entire outside of the fortification. It wasn't terribly big, probably only large enough to enclose a few buildings, but unfortunately, the gate was closed. Could I perhaps scale the wall? I looked up at it, and though it was only 10 feet high or so, I didn't fancy my chances. Plus, there was a single tower, which also seemed to be wood at one corner. A guard post. I'd been quiet when doing my initial inspection, but I'd never climbed that wall without drawing attention. Therefore, I used my entire life's experience, roughly half a day so far, to devise a plan. I found a nearby tree with a view of the gates, then hid to wait until it opened. Tree report? 3 out of 5. Uncomfortable root network. Not for an inexperienced hider. See my other reviews of trees in the area for more options. I thought I might need to wait until morning, and was contemplating demoting another half-star from the tree when I saw lights approaching quickly along the road. For a brief moment, my heart leaped. A car? Was the entire facade going to finally collapse? I'd be whisked away to a hospital and treated for amnesia? Why did the idea of going to the hospital suddenly fill me with a sense of panic? Well, it didn't take long for me to determine the lights weren't on some kind of vehicle. At least, not unless horses counted. Did they? I mean, a chariot is a vehicle, but it only moves when it's attached to the beasts. So, are the horses part of the vehicle? And arguably, a saddle is just a small wheelless chariot, right? So, anyway, the lights proved to be wobbling lanterns hung on horses, and the two beasts were traveling way faster than I thought safe to do at night. Still, it seemed like it might offer an opportunity, as the wooden gates slid open as the horses approached. I couldn't tell much about the two riders beneath their hooded cloaks. They slowed their horses and trotted in through the gates. A few lights were lit further inside, illuminating two larger structures, one of stone, the other of the same slightly ramshackle wooden thatch of the village. I couldn't really call this a castle. It was more 2 barns with a really big fence. Those inside didn't immediately move to close the gates, perhaps anticipating that the riders might leave again soon. The two did have the look of messengers, so I took my opportunity, slinking forward through the darkness. I kept telling myself that I wasn't doing anything dangerous, that this was just some extravagant kind of play acting. And yet, my worry persisted. Why was part of me so certain, against logic, that this was all real? Well, my sneaking skills got me in through the gate without being spotted. It was still pretty dark, and I just had this instinct for how to stick to the shadows, how to not present a profile, how to move without making noise. The fact that I kept wanting to rest my hand on the non-existent gun made me concerned about where I'd gotten these skills. They didn't seem the type of abilities that belonged to a law-abiding citizen who spent his days reviewing trees. I slipped up to one of the buildings, crouching beside some barrels, taking stock of what I could see. In the center of the courtyard was a large black stone, taller than it was wide. It seemed made of obsidian and had a jagged top, like a small version of the Washington Monument, only with the top broken off. There was a small stable on the far side of the courtyard. View of it had been obscured by one of the buildings. Here, the two riders had dismounted and handed their horses to a groom. I couldn't hear the conversation, but it caused another boy to go running for the stone building. It seemed to be of much finer construction than the others, so perhaps it was the Lord's manor. And that other big building, the wooden one, was perhaps a meeting hall? Curiously, set in front of the stone building were a series of dishes with lit candles at the sides. It seemed like bowls of fruit, some saucers filled with cream, perhaps, and a single piece of paper. The boy soon left the manor and ran back to the two strangers, gesturing for them to follow him. The three entered the building I'd guessed was the town hall, and I thought I heard the word refreshment from the boy. Perhaps I should have been interested in those men, but my attention was held solely by that sheet of paper. Was it from my book? Why leave it out in front of the building like that? This all seemed so bizarre. Was I maybe part of some ridiculous social experiment? A reality television game? I forced myself to wait a few tense minutes until, as I'd expected, a man in an orange cloak left the manor, accompanied by two soldiers. At least they carried long one-handed axes and round wooden shields. No armor that I could see. They had a vaguely Viking look to them. "Hey, Oswald!" one of them shouted toward the wooden watchtower. "Close the gate!" As the lord and his two men entered the hall, a younger soldier came scrambling down from the tower. He grinned to the others and bowed a little too much to the lord. He crossed over and began to swing the gate back closed. For how big it was, it seemed kind of flimsy. The lord was inside, and the guard's attention was on the gate. Time to move. I was out and scuttling across the courtyard before I had time to think it through. My body seemed to know what to do, knew that waiting would make me miss my opportunity, but also knew that I shouldn't sprint. That would make too much noise. Feeling exposed, I swiftly walked past the large black stone, then past the bowls and the candles, where I snatched the paper. Within seconds, I had crossed the courtyard and found cover beside the meeting hall. My mind was still trying to catch up to what I'd done, but my heart was thundering. I took a few long, quiet breaths to calm myself, then glanced at my paper. But there wasn't enough light to read by. Right, darkness, horror movie, all that. Well, there was a window a little further along the meeting hall. The shutter was latched, but light seeped out. I crept up to that, then held up my paper close to the cracks. It was filled with printed words matching the other pages I'd found, but this one was barely singed. It read, Chapter 2, Your Own Dimension. The intricacies of dimensional travel are unimportant, and we recommend you not trouble yourself with them. We here at Frugal Wizard Incorporated have done the hard part for you. All you need to do is pick the package you want, and we will deliver to you one pristine Earth-light dimension. I stopped reading, the words blurring as my eyes unfocused. I remembered. Not everything, not even very much, but a tiny piece snapped into place. I knew where I was. This wasn't a theme park. It wasn't some kind of strange social experiment, nor was it a game. This was another dimension, and I owned it. Your own dimension. The intricacies of dimensional travel are unimportant, and we recommend you not trouble yourself with them. We here at Frugal Wizard Incorporated have done the hard part for you. All you need to do is pick the package you want, and we will deliver to you one pristine Earth-light dimension. That said, a little history never hurt anyone. Unless you end up getting stabbed by a knight. That's just a little interdimensional humor. Our dimensions are perfectly safe. Anyway, though interdimensional travel was discovered in 2084, only recently was the technology declassified and deregulated. This allows not only recreational dimensional tourism, it offers the opportunity of a lifetime. As an interdimensional wizard, you are part of a bold new segment of explorers. Like the ancient homesteaders who rushed to claim the wealth of lands in the American West, you may stake your own claim on a unique dimension. Frugal Wizard Incorporated has obtained a band of the 305th spectrum of Category 2 medieval derivative dimensions. That fancy lingo just means our dimensions are mostly kind of similar to one another and are two categories removed from Earth itself. Things will be familiar in there, but not too familiar. We want it to remain exciting, after all. We spend all our time poring through the dimensions, selecting only the most favorable for wizard inhabitation. Act now before the good dimensions are all claimed and you are left without. Footnote 1. Legal disclaimer. This statement is made for entertainment purposes only. The interdimensional traveler takes any and all responsibility for all killings, maimings, injuries, dismemberments, and impalements that might happen to them in their respective dimensions. By signing with us, you agree to arbitration in the event of a dispute to be adjudicated in the dimension of our choice. Footnote 2. Legal disclaimer. This statement is made for entertainment purposes only. Dimensions are technically infinite, and we cannot run out.
Thanks for hanging out all the way to the end. Totally fun stuff. See y'all later.